your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse happening. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet feather, sweet feather, talking twins and hierarchy. Sweet feather, sweet feather, relentless focus on their body. Sweet feather, sweet feather, what do they mean by all American? Sweet feather, sweet feather, no sex, just titillation.
Any other high Hawaii's, or do you want to talk about this book?
Let's get into the book, I think. I'm ready to boo it.
All right, today we got Sweet Valley High, number 31, Taking Sides. We'll start with 6-word reviews, as is our custom.
As is the way of life in our culture.
You're funny. Okay, I have one, and you'll be delighted to know, I think for the first time in history, it is 6 words. My 6-word review is Jeffrey Froooonch Pardo. Sounds pretty good.
So there are a couple of different things I love about this 6-word review. Because of your beautiful style of speaking, there are multiple layers to what you said. Because at first I thought you meant Jeffrey Froooonch, the character, and Pardo sounds pretty good. Number 2, it's also like a beautiful hyphenation of his last name for when you are wed, Jeffrey Froooonch Pardo. But then also it's like Jeffrey Froooonch Pardo, like Kissing. So it's kind of nice. It's got a Jeffrey Froonch's Pardo.
And these alternate interpretations would encompass both semantic and syntactic ambiguity. And I'd be happy to do an impromptu little lesson if anyone's interested in that corner, but linguistics corner. But anyhow, thank you. Thank you for your reaction to my 6 words. Yeah. Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing at the thank you for your reaction to my 6 words.
I meant it.
I know
I really
you meant it.
It was such a thoughtful reaction.
You're welcome. My 6-word review is power play, but with love. Yum.
Yep. If the listeners do not recall, the book to which Robert refers is, of course, Power Play, Sweet Valley High, number 4, where Liz and Jess enacted a conflict in their own dynamic vis-a-vis a proxy. And this time, this happens with love. And yum, I am taking to mean you relish it. You kind of delighted in it. Is this correct?
I think the book was, I guess my yum is not that much happens. It's not like a heavy, nobody dies. It's not like a heavy, sad, we're dealing with grief, we're dealing with this, we're dealing with that. It's kind of a light, frothy confection that I ate and am excited by.
Yeah, it is that. And yet the imprint, Jeffrey, just to give a little context to the listeners here, Robert has known that I have been invested in a character called Jeffrey for some time, and Robert has not known who this is. What is revealed in this book, and I'm just going to tell you now, is that Jeffrey becomes Elizabeth's boyfriend, okay? And Jeffrey's her new guy. And I fucking love Jeffrey. I am in love with Jeffrey. I want to marry Jeffrey. Jeffrey is life. I'm not saying he's perfect. What I am saying is that compared to any other man in this series, I love him. I love Jeffrey. Do I need to extol his virtues? He's hot. Okay? He has a relaxed demeanor. My favorite thing about him, he communicates in a direct manner. My other favorite thing about him, he calls Elizabeth on her bullshit. Okay, compared to someone like Nicholas, who absolutely enables Liz's dysfunction. I mean, Jeffrey is a breath of fresh air, and him being gorgeous and having these warm, sensitive green eyes, okay, and being a star soccer player and who also grew up on a farm. And by the way, being so nice and kind to every single person he meets and treating everyone with equal respect and equal attention. Also he's creative. He's also a photographer. Like he is so kind of well-rounded. He's sensitive. He's deep. But he's also so sort of casual and has this ease in which he operates, and this also a softness, but also a assertiveness. I love him.
Okay. I think you've made your point.
Just one more thing.
Okay, sure.
I just, the way a lot of these people behave is so dysfunctional. The Enids, the Elizabeths, the avoiders, the deniers, the overcompensation, just the projection, the constant sort of aroundness of it all. And Jeffrey's the only person who just sort of like gets in there, says what he means and what he wants. It's like, it's so refreshing. And now I'm done about that. Thank you.
I worried that Jeffrey wasn't long for this world because he does seem so unproblematic.
Like Regina. He's like boy Regina.
Yeah, he's just like pretty normal and like kind of like, okay, cool. Like, oh, Enid seems fine. I don't really have a connection with her, but like I'll still be nice to her. Okay. I'll dance with Lila. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be rude. Did we have a special before this or no?
No, before this was Jaloux Lies.
The cliffhanger from Jaloux Lies. We're at a party.
You know what? I gotta say something.
Always.
Remember when Nicholas Morrow showed up like so much of a vampire?
Vampire, sure.
On the doorstep of the Wakefields, and I said people have to show up at a door. I also at that time was thinking of Jeffrey, because for me, Jeffrey showing up at that door, it's like life is like before Jeffrey and after Jeffrey. It's like the beginning of a new era, as the Taylor Swift people would say. So I'll go back on mute now.
I just love like people love to show up at a door. How else would you expect Jeffrey to get to this party, which is inside their home? Like you expect him to kind of airlift over and be in the backyard, or like astral project in?
It was about not just literally showing up at a door, but showing up at a door, locking eyes with a person, and like there being an intense connection established from that very second. That's what I was thinking about with Jeffrey.
Totally fair. So the door in question is the Wakefield's door. We are having a surprise, not bon voyage party for Dybbuk, Stephen, because he was going to leave and now he's not going to leave. And at 20 minutes after 10, the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Elizabeth said. Aaron Dallas was standing on the stoop, looking slightly sheepish. And next to him was a new boy from Oregon Pardo wanted to fuck, and Enid had been eyeing at the dance. Jeffrey Froooonch. Liz, I'm so sorry I'm late, Aaron said. I've brought a grape catcher with me too, if that's okay, Liz. This is Jeffrey Froooonch. Jeff, this is Elizabeth Wakefield. Come on in, Elizabeth said warmly. She smiled at Jeffrey, who was even handsomer from this close range. His blonde hair had a bright sheen, and his eyes were a dark green. Welcome to Sweet Valley, she said, putting her hand out to shake his. Thanks, Jeffrey said. His voice was surprisingly low and warm, and Elizabeth decided then and there that she liked him. Believe me, I feel welcome already. The Dallases have been unbelievably nice to me. Aaron's been showing me around. We met at soccer camp last summer, and poor guy, he never suspected I'd show up in town one day, taking him up on his offer to give me the grand tour. It's been a lot of fun, Aaron protested. We're late because I took Jeffrey over to meet the coach. Jeffrey's exactly what we need on the team.
Is Aaron like a meth? Like what?
So I'm so glad you got that. Oh, that's my characterization of Aaron was he was like on speed or something.
Wait, are you joking?
No, I'm being very serious.
That's actually so funny.
Thank you.
I got the giggles today. There's no good. We gotta keep going. You want to see the cover? Okay, what's the taglines? Okay, so
we haven't even gotten to the.
Oh my God, sorry. Let me mute.
Jeffrey's exactly what we need on the team. Unfortunately, when the coach gets enthusiastic, it's hard to stop him. Well, I'm glad you made it, Both of you, Elizabeth said. It'll be good for you to get a chance to meet some of the people here anyway. She smiled at Jeffrey. Why don't you come in and introduce yourself? I'd love to, Jeffrey said, his green eyes twinkling. Elizabeth took his jacket and moved to the hall closet, a smile playing about her lips. She knew one guest in particular who was going to be more than happy to be introduced to Jeffrey. Enid Rollins was going to be overjoyed that the new boy had dropped by. And for her friend's sake, Elizabeth hoped Enid was one of the first people he said hello to. Enid has stiff competition for Jeffrey Froonch's attention, none other than Lila Fowler. Jessica and Elizabeth enter the hottest matchmaking duel ever in Sweet Valley High number 31, Taking Sides.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Plot summary?
Oh, we don't do taglines before plot summary? I don't know. That was a genuine question. Very
Sorry.
genuine.
No, I didn't mean to have eyebrows.
No.
I know how hard it is to have someone do eyebrows to you.
Don't say "oh" when looking at my wig.
We do plot summary now.
I would love to be involved in that in any way that you see appropriate.
I want you to do a plot, and I'm going to be plot, and I'm going to ask you to do it in. I say this with love. Lately it's getting with the details a little bit. You love to sort of say, you love to in the plot summary, for example, say something like, and then the phone rang, and on the phone it was, it's like, okay, we can. So, if we could do maybe like a few sentences, maybe.
Just a few sentences about the phone ring, and then I could do kind of the rest of it, kind of in a free form, more like beat poet. I mean, the A plot is pretty simple. Jeffrey Froonch, hot. Enid wants. Lila wants. Elizabeth and Jessica kind of battle, trying to scheme to get Enid close to Jeffrey, to get Lila close to Jeffrey. But in the end, who really wants to be close to Jeffrey besides Pardo? Elizabeth does. And who does Jeffrey really want to be close to? Why, it's not shy, pretty honestly boring Enid Rollins. It's not rich party goer and party thrower Lila Fowler. It's our own Elizabeth Wakefield. And they're like dances and bullshit throughout, but basically like they end up together. Yay!
Yeah, it did feel kind of similar to Bitter Rivals in the way, to me, of just like Bitter Rivals is the whole book. Elizabeth is trying to force Enid to be friends with Amy, and like they don't want to. And like this, the whole book, it's like she's trying to force Enid and Jeffrey because she actually wants Jeffrey. And it's a lot of, as you once said, don't do that, Liz. It's a lot of that feeling.
Yeah.
Don't do that, Liz. The B plot is Cousin Jenny has come to visit.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about Cousin Jenny.
Cousin Jenny has very much kind of the old Robin Wilson Never Forget vibes of being fat and that being a problem, her being this embodied messiness and unfitness and too muchness, exceeding of the boundaries and the spilling of the ice cream and the all this type of stuff. And she gets on Jess's nerves, and so she's come to visit them for a couple of weeks, and she drives Jess crazy, but she of course only has eyes for Jess, and Jess is her favorite, and she wants to be always with her. And she basically is preventing, in Jessica's perspective, Jessica getting together with her new crush, this guy Eddie Winters. Robert, you probably were thinking of, is this Eddie Strong from Hostage? They have the same first name. Nope.
Different last names. Okay, different Eddies. Good to know. Are they brothers?
That's not how brothers works.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, if that were true, this Suzanne Hamlin and Suzanne Devlin would be sisters.
Wait, they're not sisters? Well, that's very confusing.
So Jessica's trying to go with this guy Eddie. Jenny keeps hanging around, and Jessica's getting more and more annoyed. And in the end, to Jessica's surprise, he actually gets together with Jenny.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's some interesting dynamics here in terms of like the way in which Jess and Liz are supposedly taking sides here is that like Jessica is trying to set up or facilitate the getting together of Lila and new Hawkeye Jeffrey, and Liz is doing that for Enid. You know, as in Power Play when they were supposedly fighting over does Robin Wilson become a PBA or not, and we talked about how they're enacting all sorts of their actual dynamics with each other vis-a-vis her. You know, in this case, I think we're going to say the same thing. At the same time that Jess is pushing Lila and Jeffrey together and thinking like, oh my gosh, like, how can they not see that Jeffrey and Enid are such a bad match and that would be the worst match ever? And it's like she's not noticing in front of her eyes that like the guy she's going after shares more interest in common with Jenny. Like the thing that is unacceptable about Jenny going with Eddie or about Enid going with Jeffrey is that Jessica gets triggered when a average looking girl gets a guy that is desirable to her because she gets triggered by how then, you know, we got in our big fight in Whore Not Lived about the kinds and the types, but she likes to be different from those girls. And one of the ways that she gets to think she's different and better is that she gets the guys she wants. Well, guess what? It's a story everyone tells that she gets every guy. She actually doesn't. The guys that she wants almost never end up choosing her. And you know, I think it's not a coincidence that this is happening concurrently with the sort of seeds that are being set for the next book, which has to do with Jessica being triggered and being frustrated that people keep confusing her with Liz and that they're seeming undifferentiated and that she doesn't like that. Well, one of the reasons she says that she's continues this taking sides against Liz in this book is because she doesn't like that Liz is scheming, because that's not something Liz does. Liz scheming and putting this against her is also a way of making them being more similar. So it's all kind of these dynamics kind of bouncing off each other in interesting ways, I think, is what I was trying to say 20 minutes ago.
25 minutes ago, yeah. Listeners, if you aren't reading along, there are many moments in the text where we've got kind of this interpolation, we've got this kind of mishailing or whatever, I don't know, things part of it's about. But basically, long story short, people keep being like, Liz? And it's Jess. And it is not until the cliffhanger that we as first-time readers of the text understand what's going on. Because for most of the book, I'm just like, wait, this is very strange that all of a sudden everyone is thinking Liz = Jess.
Yeah, it feels very contrived. Like there's one scene where it's like Lila thinks that Jess is Liz because she's standing next to Enid and wearing Liz's sweater. It's like, no, that just wouldn't happen. It's just whatever.
Mr. Collins confuses Jess and Liz? Like, please, this man is skeevy. He knows the difference.
Also, Liz is his obsession and best friend in the world. So, all right, you want to get to taglines?
Yeah. Who will win in the battle for Jeffrey Froonch's attention?
Oscars, who will win?
No, we can't do that again. No.
It's a wonderful night for Oscar. Who will win? The 5 films nominated for Best.
That's not it. You have any other guesses?
Can Liz make Jeffrey Froonch notice Enid?
Very nice. No. Okay. Can Elizabeth outsmart Jessica in the hottest feud ever? The hottest feud ever? I don't think so. It's not the hottest feud ever.
It's not even the hottest feud in this book.
What has been our hottest feud ever, would you say, until now? I mean, Courtney and Liz. I would say Courtney and Liz. Because that one when Liz was like, once you ruined my vacation, you made it my business.
I did like that. I mean, there's the feuding over Robin getting to PBA, the aforementioned.
Well, you described it as hot?
This is not hot. I mean, what does hot mean? I don't watch The Real Housewives. What does a hot feud mean?
Like exciting or spicy or like dramatic even. I mean, listen, when we get to Jessica against Bruce, I mean, that's going to be a hot feud.
This is not a hot feud.
Nope. You want to guess what's on the back?
A tangled web, ...
Close. I mean, it would be rude if they reused that from Deceptions.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. that would be rude. A new boy in town, ...
Mm-mm. You want a clue?
Yeah, very much so.
It's more describing more describing like what's going on between Elizabeth and Jess. Like
Tug
what
of
is the-
war, dot, dot, dot.
No, a matchmaking duel. Dot dot dot.
No.
A matchmaking duel.
I am not on for today. My guesses weren't firing.
I attribute that to not to your guessing, but to the sort of these taglines because for me well, let's think about it. Maybe it is interesting. A matchmaking duel, I mean, I think it presents paradox. You know, matchmaking is not something that we usually think of as a No, I'm serious, Arbor. No.
Yeah.
Are you laughing with me?
Yes.
Like matchmaking is something we think of as being a harmonious activity. A duel is something that is combative, antagonistic. Like we've seen every competition reality show you could ever see. I've never seen one that's like the matchmaker off. You know what I mean? Like it's just like it's not a intuitive framing of matchmaking. What is the dynamic of matchmaking? It's a fight. Because you're like, well, who's fighting? It's like matchmaking is thought of as something that everyone wants the same goals, right? It's like you match the person because they want to match and they want to match. It's nice. Everyone happy. So a matchmaking duel, like it's like, what would that even look like? I mean, I guess what we're being told it looks like is that they're basically the duelers, they're throwing their contestants at the man. It's like that's how they're dueling. It's like reverse dodgeball. What is it? I'm trying to think
It's
of like
not
a metaphor.
Because that's not a thing.
Ball. Reverse dodgeball is you throw people at a ball. That's funny. Okay, but
But you want to hit the ball because you're not trying to dodge because it's again reverse.
you know what I'm saying? Like a matchmaking duel. It's like what is like how do you like model that?
I'm picturing like Millionaire Matchmaker and Patty, what's her name? Stanger. Or whatever. Stanger. And like her going up against that Jewish matchmaker from Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And I do see it. I mean, I guess it is. If there would be like one person and you're like competing as to who can find the better match, I would watch that show.
Yeah, that should be a show. We should pitch it.
I mean, I think
No one
sold
take
in the
this.
room.
No one take this. No one take this idea.
A trademark. Shall we to the text?
All right, you got to see a cover now.
Oh, I haven't seen the cover yet. That's exactly what I pictured.
Yeah, it's power play, but zoomed out a little bit.
It's just the twins, arms crossed, staring at each other angrily. That's it.
Yeah, like this one thing I have to say about it is Jess looks bad. Jess has no cheekbones. Elizabeth, at least they gave her an angle, so she's not completely looking like a piece of paper. You know what I mean? Like, and she also has like highlights on her face. Her eye has a sparkle in it, and she has still cheekbones. Jessica's just completely flat looking. I mean, we may notice that Jess seems, I think, less relaxed in a way of she seems more activated. Her fingers are clutching at her arms in a way that Liz Foster seems a little more relaxed. Jess seems a little more agitated. Liz seems more looking at her like, okay, like challenging it kind of, but Jess seems more the aggressor.
And we can see Jess's mouth is like fully downturned. She looks angry. Whereas Liz just kind of looks almost bemused. Like, oh, this is what you're doing? There's a mischievous twinkle in Liz's eye that is, I mean, Jess looks angry and sad.
And Jess's eye has no, like Liz's eye, you can see the blue.
Absolutely.
And Jess's eye, we can't see any blue. So strange.
So strange. The hottest feud ever.
Like at some point they start doing this thing called Readers of the Month. And then the back page of the book is like some girl who won a contest, which was never me. On the front it has a picture of her on the inside cover, and on the back she writes like a little few paragraphs about why she loves Sweet Valley, and it's like we'll have to dissect them like they're wild.
Did you actually enter this contest?
I don't think I ever did. I would have won.
Obviously, that's why I'm confused. That's why I was like, there's no way Pardo entered. She would have been Girl of the Month or Reader of the Month every single month.
Should we get into it?
We have to. So I think as we've talked about in the past, the opening paragraph really does provide the engine for this text. And the paragraph opens.
Don't plagiarize Dr. Whalen.
I'm sorry. As Dr. Whalen from Brandeis University taught me now 22 years ago. Isn't that wild? Elizabeth, you're blocking the sun, Jessica Wakefield complained, shading her aquamarine eyes and squinting critically at her twin sister. Elizabeth laughed. Twins are supposed to share things, right? At least that's what you told me this morning when you borrowed that bracelet you're wearing. You'd think we'd be able to share the sunlight, too. So we get from the very beginning this kind of confrontational oppositional. We got a feud brewing, baby. It's the hottest feud of all time.
But specifically, it's she's blocking her. And I think we might ask, in what way is Elizabeth blocking Jessica in this book, or in what way is Jessica being blocked? On the level of paraphrasable content, the one who's blocking Jessica is Jenny, because Jenny has arrived and is blocking Jessica from being able to pursue her romantic with Eddie, and so she's the sort of block in that sense. And so there are signs in this book that Jessica is attracted herself to Jeffrey. I think that we could ask, why does Jessica get so excited about Lila's pursuit of Jeffrey? Why is she so supportive of it? And why doesn't she go after him herself? I just might ask, we know the paragraph's engine that drives the boat, and it's not just that they're in a conflict. Specifically, that's the way in which the conflict is happening, is such a block. I think another interpretation I had was that she's blocking her light and her attention, and that's through her becoming less differentiated from her, and kind of Jessica feeling like unnoticed because she's not different.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking about the idea of like the light, the sun, the illumination, the attention, the spotlight. The other thing of note for me is Elizabeth has this kind of clever retort that does actually kind of one-up her and best her. And in that way, it may also feel a little like that's a Jess thing, like being that kind of quick on your feet and witty and sharp and sexy, and that's Jess. And so when Liz does it from the very beginning of the book, it's like, whoa, who's who?
Yeah, she has a retort. And not only that, it makes Lila laugh.
Ugh.
Right? And so then we're getting now, to overread things here, but one, I just trying to phrase it, stick out at me. And when I saw the word, Jessica's like, can't I get any sunshine? You guys are making me get up. She pulls herself up to a sitting position. The girls were sitting on the grassy front lawn in front of Sweet Valley High. This is a regular scene that we've seen them. They love to sit on the lawn and catch some rays, either at lunch or sometimes after school, whatever. But something about the word, first we saw this sort of triangulation between kind of Elizabeth and the sun and Jessica, and now we're getting these things happening on a grassy lawn, and we're kind of wondering, from whence did the bullet come, and from whence did the shot get triggered and shot, and whose really are the attacks, who's trying to kind of assassinate whom, and just causing us to sort of play a bit of a game of Clue here on the lawn, if you know what I mean.
I want to be clear. I do not know what you mean. Are you talking like grassy knoll, but the word grassy? Okay.
Yes.
So it's just the word grassy that you've gotten.
Grassy lawn. Lawn sounds like knoll, and is kind of a knoll. No, but it's not just the fact of it being called grassy. It's like it's because of also just the triangulation. Ooh, who's coming for who? Like, who's coming for who in this book? Elizabeth says she's just trying to support Emmett, but she's really coming for Jess, like in an indirect way. It's all about indirectness, triangulation. And this bullet, did it come from where? The front, the back, the side?
Which bullet is the bullet to who you refer?
The one who caused JFK to be dead.
Sure. But I mean, in this text,
the matchmaking duel bullet, the bullet of the duel.
Yes, of course. Yeah, the bullet of the duel.
Boopity boop.
Bippity bop. Oh, one thing that I liked in the description of our twins is when they talk about Jessica. Jessica loved crowds and excitement, and it wasn't surprising that her hobbies usually put her in the limelight. Co-captain of the cheerleaders with Robin Wilson, Jessica did everything she could to maintain what she called her, quote-unquote, visibility. I thought it was such a brilliant way to characterize Jessica, which it is true, but it also gets us thinking about being seen, being visible, and the kind of anxiety that Jess feels in this book, and then that gets kind of foretold in the book to come about Jess's invisibility, her indistinguishability from Liz, etc. And I also just feel like this is such a cool, like, Jessica's such a modern character. You know, they say like Hamlet was the first modern, but like Jessica is the first like social media modern character. She knows about getting eyes on what she's doing on her content. And she's like, I'm about visibility. Like, she would have fucking ruled SEO and like all of that. Like, can you imagine if we had been lucky enough to watch Jessica come of age in the Instagram world, in the TikTok world? Can you imagine the work she would have done on Vine? Like, she is just, I love her.
100%. I wrote down Jessica invented personal branding. Jessica invented being famous for being famous.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%.
Kim Kardashian wishes.
Could never.
Could never, would never.
Then we get Jeffrey, and everyone's gaze goes to, oh, isn't that the new guy from Oregon? And isn't his name Jeffrey? And he's from a farm. And they all look at him, and some of them are blushing, and some of them aren't, and some of them are just talking matter of factly. Oh, yes, that is him, and that's Liz. And the one who's blushing is Enid, but she's trying to look nonchalant because she's horny for him. And Jessica's like, wow, he must be romantic with a name like Jeffrey Froooonch. And Elizabeth's like, well, he sure is good looking.
Hoping to close the discussion.
And then she enters into her favorite class, projection 101. She
Yeah.
knew how uncomfortable it must be making Enid feel. And she talks about how basically Enid has had a sort of instant crush on him, although she's not really talked to him very much yet. And it goes from a normal, chatting with your girlfriend of, oh, how can I scheme a way to bump into him, or how can I find a way to get some time with him or get to know him, that's sort of, I think, reasonably harmless, to an absolutely pathological and based on a deranged misunderstanding of how attraction works, idea that if she can shove Enid into this guy's face faster than Jess can shove Lila into his face, basically whoever gets there first is gonna win, or whoever gets to spend time with him first is gonna be his instant girlfriend or something. It has nothing to do with any of his characteristics or their chemistry or their mutual interest in each other, and once they get to know each other, and that it's just a race. It's so weird.
It's like mere exposure theory, where it's oh, if we just get one of them close enough to him, just the exposure will be enough that he'll fall in love. It's very silly.
And Elizabeth and Enid are winking at each other because they are playing up that he's a farm boy and his outdoorsy nature, and thinking that Lila's not going to be interested in that because she only likes rich boys that aren't outdoorsy except for being on a yacht. But Lila actually thinks he sounds divine.
I bet he's got a really sensitive side to him. Isn't that what you always hear about farm boys? What? What kind of softcore Bridges of Madison County horse whisperer? What?
And she's like, Daddy says that out of doors is the best place for a young man to build character.
What could that possibly mean? It's just I know it needs to be said to fit this, but George Fowler thinks the out of doors is the best place for a young man to build character? No.
Well, I think this actually rings true for me because it is consistent with the fact that we've seen from Fowler that he has these things he likes to say, that Lila repeats, that work builds character, and that it's really important to know the value of $1. And they say things they don't live by, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's yeah, he loves to say hard work builds character, but he gets sort of cushiest au pair gig where she doesn't have to do anything. And he said the out of doors is a good place to build character, but they never go out of doors. So I think it's funny.
Jessica looks delighted at the idea that Lila is so interested. Lila, what a great idea, and who knows, maybe one thing will lead to another. You and Jeffrey Froooonch would make the best couple ever. Elizabeth bit her lip. Oh, I don't think so, she said, trying not to show how upset she was. Enid looked horrified. And this probably isn't even the first moment, but we're barely into the book, and it's already wow, Liz really seems to be having big reactions about Jeffrey being with someone other than Enid, ?
And so is Jess. The fact of her being delighted that Jeffrey can help her out, and then she shrieks, claps her hands, says, bravo, let's go over so I can introduce you to Lila. Why?
Yeah. It's a lot of emotion for other people's relationships.
But for Elizabeth, this is consistent with how she behaves, which is denial, avoidance, projection. Mm-hmm. For Jessica, I think for me, it's harder to understand what's going on with Jessica here.
So one thing I wondered is part of this the Eddie not strong winter, I guess, of it all? She's got Eddie, so she's not thinking about a boy for herself, and so she's thinking about a boy for Lila?
That's, I think, what like we would have to think from the story, but it doesn't feel.
Yeah,
And it's not like she's the type of person that can only hold one boy in her mind at once.
absolutely not, thankfully. How sad would it be to be that type of person, only having one boy in your mind at once?
I don't think we're
Wouldn't
going to get an
know.
answer.
Okay, we don't need an answer.
I mean, I don't think there's an answer in the text, but I mean, I don't know. All right.
So here we have in the very beginning this kind
Yep.
of, this is the feud. This is the hottest feud, the matchmaking duel. Who will win Jeffrey Froonch's attention, Lila or Enid? We don't really know anything about Jeffrey except what everyone is projecting onto him. The idea that he's a farm boy, the idea that he's sweet, the idea that he's athletic, the idea that he's outdoorsy. We don't know any of this to be true at all. And so it's interesting that like the central thrust of this is just like, who's going to do a better job matchmaking, when it's like, we don't actually know if Jeffrey would be interested in anybody. Maybe Jeffrey's gay, although he's definitely not. But I mean, some people are.
But it's also like a duel of ideologies, right? Where it's like Jessica and Lila's ideology is that the pretty girl should win.
Mm-hmm.
And Liz and Enid's ideology is even a regular girl can get a guy like Jeffrey. Because one of the things I noticed is when Elizabeth is just thinking about, I know you're not on pages today, but on page 3,
Mm-hmm.
all that happens is that Jessica asks Lila to share her boombox or something. Lila's like, sure, we have 1 million of them, take it, doesn't matter. And Elizabeth is sort of rolling her eyes thinking like, oh, well, Jessica calls that generous, but like Lila's such a spoiled brat, basically. And it's going through Elizabeth's thinking of of just Lila and how she is. And Elizabeth sighs. It says Elizabeth sighed, her gaze moving past Lila to her sister Jessica. And I'm always paying attention when it says Elizabeth sighs. And I did wonder when I saw that, why is just thinking about Lila when Lila at this point hasn't done anything yet? Then when I see her sighing as she watches Lila approach him, I think maybe a little bit what's motivating her pushing Enid is this. It's a little bit of a moral philosophy or a worldview of like, not only the Lilas should be always getting who they want and let's get one for our team kind of thing, you know?
Which is interesting because what team does Liz think she's on?
She thinks she's on team. It doesn't matter if you're pretty rich and popular. Like, you can be a nice person and also have curly hair and just a smattering of freckles and still get a guy like Jeffrey. I don't know.
It's just interesting because it's like she sees herself that way, but she is a certified hottie. From 1 to 10, she's a certified 20.
Yeah, and she has like hottie privilege that allows her to not care, quote unquote, about these things. The same way she doesn't care about how guys look, and Jessica's so shallow, but she happens to only ever date the hottest guys herself. And it's just an accident. Like when she accidentally made best friends with the Countess in a mansion. So
Yeah.
she loves to
It's
not care about things and just they fall in her lap.
It is really interesting that she really aligns herself with Enid because it's like, we're the same. It's like, sweetie, you're not the same.
You know, you could take a critical reading that one of the reasons it's a little convenient for her to align herself with Enid is she looks even better by comparison. You know,
No.
if she hung out with Jess all the time, she's not the hot
Pardo.
one. She's not the hot one, and there can only be one. She's so nice that she'll be friends with the most boring, nerdy, plain girl, Enid, who like even being a plane crash and being fake paralyzed can't make her interesting. Tiny note, but I have to say it because it drives me crazy. Jenny's coming to visit.
Mm-hmm.
She stays in Jess's room.
Oh, yeah.
Why can't she stay in the den or in Steven's room?
Or the basement with the washing machine and dryer.
Well, basement, I don't know. It might not be comfortable down there, but yes. Now Elizabeth goes on her psychotic campaign to like do the thing she loves to do, which is like promise people things that she has no control over. So when she promised Robin Wilson that she would get in the PBA and that Bruce would ask her to dance, when she promised Annie Whitman she would be a cheerleader, and now she's basically like through this book progressively leaning in and promising and doubling down to Enid that Jeffrey will like her or does like her or like they can get Jeffrey to like her, and it's like of course they can. It's so weird.
It's really weird. So they're talking back and forth, Enid and Liz, and Enid's like, I can't believe my rotten luck, Liz. Lila could go after any guy she wanted. Why does she have to go for the one guy in the world I'm interested in? There's no point in giving up, Elizabeth said cheerfully. for some reason that doesn't really fit in with the situation. What do you mean? Lila's got everything. Cars, credit cards, an incredible mansion. How in the world am I supposed to compete with all that? Elizabeth giggled. Lila doesn't have Elizabeth Wakefield on her side. And I'll tell you something, Enid. I am not going to sit back and watch that girl walk all over poor Jeffrey. Do you really think I've got a chance? I don't just think so, Elizabeth said confidently. I know so. This is wackadoo. What? Like, it just doesn't, what?
Just to lay it out here. What is twisted about this is getting to know this guy, Jeffrey, that they both have this sort of initial superficial crush on. They're framing this as, from the jump, a competition where instead of just being about being interested in getting to know him, it becomes now a competition between her and Lila. It's also twisted in the sense that Liz is, we see that right away it's about Liz. Enid says, well, then how can I compete with her? And Liz goes, well, Lila doesn't have Elizabeth Wakefield on her side. And it reminds me of when Robin Wilson said to Liz, are you sure PBA isn't actually being cruel? Are you sure they're going to let me in after all of this humiliation? And Elizabeth goes, yes, because if they didn't, it would be so cruel that Elizabeth Wakefield would never be a part of that organization. One thing I think we have to know is, so Elizabeth giggled. Lila doesn't have Elizabeth Wakefield on her side. And I'll tell you something, Enid. I am not going to sit back and watch that girl walk all over poor Jeffrey. Now, that girl, we could assume, and I think are meant to assume, is referring back to Lila.
But
however, that girl could also be referring to Jessica. Again, telling us that Lila is a proxy for Jessica from Elizabeth's perspective here, and that it's really about their conflict. Huh?
There's something there. Yes, definitely. I also just, Lila's hot, right?
She's pretty and she cleans up nice, but like, she doesn't have exactly the cheekbones. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She tried to be on the cover of All, and she knew unsuccessfully she wouldn't photograph well.
Yeah, I picture her as like, yeah, she has nice shiny hair because she puts expensive products in, and she like looks good because she can afford like to go to that spa, tone her thighs, and buy all the expensive, nice jeans that like.
Because it's just interesting. So I guess Enid, we are to believe that Enid and Lila are attractiveness wise pretty comparable.
That's the whole enigma of Enid's hotness that we've been discussing since book 2 of like, is she hot or not? Yeah, she's pretty, she's cute. Like, I think she looks good, but because of her social status of like, the only reason she's connected to anything cool is because of Elizabeth, and other than that, she's just like boring and like no one cares about her. She doesn't do anything interesting ever. They're probably equal prettiness if you put them in a castaway situation for like 10 years. Like they probably come out of a cave like looking equal hotness.
Yeah, so I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say, listeners, if you are presented with 2 potential mates who are about even attractiveness level and one of them is super rich, it's not a hard choice. Pick the rich person.
I also think she's more interesting to be around. Like, for example, Lila has her moments of, she's dumb sometimes, but sometimes she's smart. And she is funny on occasion, whereas Enid is never interesting.
No. And Lila would probably shoplift all sorts of cool gifts for you just to get her dad's attention, but whatever.
And just give you stuff, like
Yeah.
her stereo. Okay.
Well, her dad has 5 at home. So we have Cousin Jenny coming to visit. We get the kind of description of Cousin Jenny and how she's like, she looks up to Jessica. She's obsessed with Jessica, but she's the nerdiest cousin in the whole world. And of course, it's great that Jenny is really interested in Jessica because Elizabeth is up to her eyes and ears in work for the Oracle's Food Drive Week coverage.
Don't you know it? That Elizabeth happens to, and it's just this time. It's just this week. It's almost never like this. This week she's going to have to be a little bit late at the Oracle. This week she's going to have a little bit extra work for the Oracle because she's got a little bit extra administrative duty that probably Mr. Roger Collins gave her.
So she is working on a special supplement that the Oracle is preparing for Food Drive Week, a program set up in conjunction with the PTA to help raise money and food for needy families in the area. For the next 2 weeks, it looked as if the Oracle would demand even more of Elizabeth's time than it usually did.
You'll notice that it says that this food drive is a collaboration with the PTA, which we know Elizabeth is on shaky ground with ever since she double booked the auditorium.
Yeah.
To help.
But that turned out fine.
thanks to Didi, to help raise money and food for needy families in the area. Now, we see examples of them raising food because the auction that's going to happen, what people are bidding with isn't money, it's canned food, right? We don't see any examples of them raising money. And I do have an article about how, we've critiqued some of their philanthropic, we talked about the late stage capitalism and the rock around the clock and the consumerization of philanthropy, right? I did want to mention that this whole thing of donating cans of food to food banks is actually considered not good.
Ooh.
Can I tell you why?
Uh-oh, yeah.
No, it's not, it's whatever, but it's actually good to know.
Okay.
So from feedingamerica.org, donating food to a food bank, consider cash instead of canned goods. And they have a few very straightforward reasons that make a lot of sense when you hear them about why. Number one, they can turn donated dollars into more meals. They don't pay retail prices. So their network of food banks basically get discounts, right? So you can get more from $1 if you give them than from giving them a can of food, right? Of what the equivalent would be. The other thing is that it has supply chain implications on the cost of moving all this stuff around. It also doesn't benefit them, whereas if they use donated funds to cover the cost of picking up food from donors and moving them around in warehouses and stuff like that. So cash donations can help them with that. Donations build healthier communities. Canned goods and dry food items like pasta and rice are a vital part of food banks and pantries, but no one can live healthy lives on non-perishable items alone. They work to keep food banks and pantries stocked with fresh fruits, vegetables, low-fat, dairy, and lean proteins, and those can't be directly donated. They use funds to combat food waste. Not all food banks have the capacity for large food donations. So if you want to help food banks, you should just give them money because they just have the knowledge and expertise and the infrastructures in place to procure their own food in a better way. But this is the problem. The same way why you have to do rock around the clock and the same way why you have to do all this novelty stuff is because if you ask people for money, they don't want to donate money. They do want to go to an event. They do want to, and more likely to give a can than to give cash. But
just a quick note, there is one more additional activity beyond just the auction. There's also the dance.
Beach party
dance thing. Which maybe they charge money for admission?
Yeah, it would be good to get some details on that. Maybe we will.
Yeah.
Chapter 2.
Got to.
So Enid's talking to Liz and she's like, how am I going to get Jeffrey to like me? And Liz is like, how could anyone prefer Lila to you? You're sweet, sincere, clever, witty, everything a nice guy like Jeffrey would naturally care about. And Liz is like, we have to prepare a counterattack. Again, this like, first of all, counterattack, and second of all, we.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the way that Elizabeth describes Enid, sweet, sincere, clever, witty, everything a nice guy like Jeffrey would naturally care about. You're the kind of girl that Jeffrey would really like.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth, like, it feels psychologically very understandable that, like, Elizabeth likes this guy, but can't let herself like this guy. So instead, she's going to try and set Enid up.
It just gets pretty extreme.
Oh, sure.
Basically, Liz is like, well, I have good news. Like, apparently he is a photographer and he's interested in the Oracle, so I'll probably get a chance to get to know him so I can like have an in with him, and then that'll help get you closer to him. And Enid's like, great. Jenny shows up. She's being Jenny.
Thick glasses, unkempt hair, at least, emphasis in the original text, 10 pounds overweight, and dressed in the most unflattering fuchsia sweats. Jenny was, as far as Jessica was concerned, a mess.
And again, I think it's worth saying, I think part of what's threatening to Jessica about Jenny is the idea that there's something similar about them. So what Jenny immediately does is she asks her about where'd you get your sweater, right? Which is disturbing that she would wear the same sweater as her. And also she's like, I'm on a diet. I want to be skinny like you. And it's like that, I think that's a problem for Jess.
Yeah. Now there is one glamorous thing about Jenny. Do you know what the glamorous thing? What's Jenny's secret? What's so glamorous about our sweet Genoise?
Well, she's from the glamorous town called Dallas. But you wouldn't know it because the creature didn't act like it.
There's nothing funny. Like, who is the target audience for these books that thinks of Dallas as a glamorous place to live?
I was thinking if there was a TV show. First I thought Dynasty, then I thought the show Dallas of like,
Yes,
was there a
Dallas.
show at yeah, but Dallas isn't, that show wasn't like glamorous.
No,
So I'm
no,
thinking,
no.
was there a Dallas set show at the time that would have been glamorous? Where's Designing Women? No, they were in,
Atlanta.
yeah. A bunch of them are Casey's, like Jessica, Jenny, Eddie, Lila. They bump into Aaron and Jeffrey. And like basically Jenny's annoying Jessica and Jeffrey seems really great. And Jessica like observes that he's really nice and even more good looking close up.
Which everyone
And
seems to
then-
notice.
And then Jenny spills the beans to Jess later that Enid also has a crush on Jeffrey. So now Jessica and Lila know that Liz and Enid are kind of going after them. And Jessica thinks to herself, did Liz think she could outfox her own twin?
Mhm.
And decides to exclude them from Lila's pool party that she's planning.
And she comes up very quickly with a really good lie.
It's a pool party at the Fowlers.
For a
Hamburgers
change.
are sizzling on the grill. There's salad and cold drinks. Lila even looks exotic and sexy with her brown hair on a sleek bun. But Jeffrey hadn't been paying that much attention to Lila. Not that he wasn't perfectly charming and friendly. He said all the right things, but it was obvious he wanted to get to know Lila's other guests too. In fact, he had gone so far as to suggest a game of water volleyball. And they're all playing, and he's just being nice to everyone. But Jessica's annoyed because she's not getting to spend any time with Eddie because Jenny likes to swim. And so she's having fun in the pool with Eddie. While Jessica's just lying in the sun fantasizing about him. Then we get a broken palindrome to the first scene, where the first scene, Jessica's reverie in the sun was interrupted by Liz blocking her. Now she is interrupted by icy water dripping on her legs, which is Jenny, who's come out of the pool, and who's actually sitting on Eddie's shoulders. And they've been playing. Then Jenny spills the beans again.
Mm-hmm.
So Jenny's not supposed to tell Liz about the pool party and then ends up spilling beans about it. And Liz realizes that they schemed to exclude them from it. And she thinks, well, now I'm even gonna scheme against Jess even more.
So now Liz tells Enid about how Lila and Jess are scheming, and Enid is like, what are we going to do? It's all going to be terrible. But don't worry. Liz has a scheme, which is she will try to get Jeffrey to go to the volleyball game with Enid. She'll say like, oh, we need some pictures of the volleyball game. Could you go? And then Enid will be waiting in the bleachers alone, and then they'll sit together.
You know, when we say Liz should leave the scheming to Jessica,
Yeah,
Liz should leave the scheming to Jessica.
this is nothing.
Her quote unquote scheme is to tell Jeffrey he thinks he should go to this event that Enid will also be at. I'm like, okay.
It's just, I think part of why Jessica is so successful at scheming is because she recognizes that it is a competition and that it is not just enough for Lila and Jeffrey to be in the same place. Like somebody needs to be like massaging that. Whereas Liz does not seem to understand that Jeffrey isn't naturally drawn to Enid and so needs some stronger push than just being in the same gym while it's going on.
Which Elizabeth then later is like, okay, I guess the stronger push is me just like manically, compulsively talking about her constantly, how great she is, and just like, maybe if I can talk it into him. Oh, I just have one note on at the end of chapter 3, Alice, I wrote Alice having histrionic personality disorder vis-a-vis a pearl pin. Because Jessica comes to her, Jessica's so frustrated with being blocked by Jenny in her pursuit of Eddie. So she goes to Alice's bedroom. She's seething. She closes the door. Mrs. Wakefield is applying makeup, getting ready for a dinner party she's going to with Ned. She goes, I've had it. And Alice goes, had it with what? Giving her a smile. Which do you think looks better, the pearl pin or the silver one? So just to say, Alice, who famously felt so bad about not having a close relationship with her daughters, and we remarked that we literally couldn't think of one example of her ever having talked to them before. Jessica is now coming into her room and saying, I'm upset. She's closing the door. She's visibly upset here. Alice's response is to smile at her, say, what's wrong? And then immediately, without even giving her a chance to answer, saying, which pin do you like better? Jessica goes, they both look fine. Then we get a digression about how beautiful she is. And then Alice ignores her. Okay, Alice just says they look fine, and Alice won't accept this. This is called controlling. Because listen to what happens. It says, oh, I guess they're propin, Jessica said at last. So that means that she had said they're both fine. Nothing happened. And then she finally chose one. So that's a power move. Alice is forcing her to choose one. And then Alice keeps smiling and says, thanks, what's up? So I'm like, that's a really nice way to be attentive to your daughter who's telling you she's upset. And then Alice is basically like, well, fuck you. You have to be nice to her. So don't you dare even try anything. Oracle office. Liz has to stick around. Jeffrey's coming to, Collins was going to show him around the Oracle, but Collins and Penny both have to go. So wouldn't you know, Liz has to actually be the one to show Jeffrey around. So Elizabeth and Jeffrey, basically, she shows him around the Oracle. And despite herself, I mean, it's instant chemistry. I mean, she's smiling at him. He's saying, oh, you're twins with Jessica, but you're so completely different, aren't you? And she's like, wow, like he already can so see into my soul, even though he's just met me. He must be so sensitive and perceptive.
She's blushing. He's laughing. This is like textbook meet cute, bang, bang, booty chain. Let's do this thing.
And they're just getting to know each other. He's telling her about his lifestyle in Oregon.
He asks if she has a boyfriend. Her cheeks burned. Is that someone who wants to set this guy up with Enid, Pardo? Are her cheeks burning with the desire to see Jeffrey Froooonch with Enid Rollins?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Oh, and guess what? She feels such a nice instant connection with him that she even confides in him her deepest, darkest secret, which is that she takes her writing seriously. And maybe one day it could be a job.
But she's never told
she never tells
anyone that. It's her one secret.
She should start saying to people, like, this is my secret that I haven't told anyone since the last book.
It's giving, do you remember that cycle of ANTM where they had to do the secret deodorant commercials? And they're like, what's your secret?
Yes.
I eat ice cream in bed. I tell myself I'm beautiful every day.
Every day.
I want to be a writer someday as a job. That's my secret.
What's my secret? I eat ice cream in bed. I tell myself I'm beautiful every single day.
Liz tells Jeffrey that he should. She's like, I'm working on this food drive thing. Like, you want to help? He's like, yeah, of course, I'd love to. Because he's interested, obviously, in her. And she's like, okay, how about you participate in the auction? People auction off all kinds of silly things. Like Ken auctioned off his football. Mr. Collins auctioned off a homemade dinner, which I said, what? Is this something he's coming to their house and cooking?
No.
Or is this something he's delivering in Tupperware?
It better be Tupperware. It better come to the school. It better not it better be like, I bring it to English class and you pick it up from my English classroom where there are other people observing and making sure this is okay.
I'm comfortable with him delivering it via courier service. That's fine. A bike messenger. That's fine. She's like, so you should auction off yourself. She's thinking to herself, Enid's going to buy you in the auction. And he's thinking to himself, oh, Liz, you probably want to buy me in the auction. And she's thinking, not consciously, but subconsciously, he thinks I want to buy him in the auction. Liz watched him get into the car. She couldn't kid herself. Jeffrey didn't seem very excited at the prospect of getting together with Enid. All she could do was hope that he'd make it that night, which is the volleyball game she told him to go to.
Yeah.
So she told him to go to the volleyball game, and he, by the way, doesn't commit to it or seem excited. He's like, yeah, I guess that sounds fun, maybe. But she acts as if he did. He's
like, will you be there? And she's like, no, I need to hang out with my cousin, which is, of course, a lie.
Yeah. And then she goes, so all she could do was hope that he's going to show up to this volleyball thing. And then it says, because she knew if he didn't, Enid was going to be very disappointed. Enid being disappointed is something we should be able to handle. You know what I mean? The same way in Bitter Rivals, when she kept overextending herself with Amy, it was like, and kept inconveniencing Enid. I remember her saying to herself, like she couldn't handle the thought of disappointing Amy. It's okay if people are disappointed sometimes.
No, I totally agree. We're kind of in chapter 5, and Enid and Elizabeth are talking, and Elizabeth feels kind of weird about it. And she feels weird about the conversation she had with Jeffrey. She'd never blatantly tried to fix anyone up, and it was extremely embarrassing. She had always thought that people were smart enough to figure out who they were interested on their own, but she had promised Enid, and Enid was her best friend.
She does say to Enid, he didn't say he could definitely come. But she must have told her, like, but he said he's going to try to come, or he seemed enthusiastic about it or something.
Then he doesn't show up. And Enid is like, oh, he must just not be interested in me. He must think I'm hideous. And Elizabeth like keeps trying to talk Enid into this, which is honestly like a little mean-spirited in some ways. Or not mean-spirited, just like kind of potentially hurtful.
Yeah, it is interesting how, sort of similar to her like gradual realization when Todd came back to visit in Special Christmas that like they didn't have feelings. In this one, I think there's a gradual realization of her having feelings that starts with like, she really hoped that Jeffrey would go to the game and find Enid. Or at least she thought she did. It was terrible, but one tiny part of her seemed to hope that he wouldn't, only she didn't have the faintest idea why she felt that way. So gradually in the book, we see her describing the thoughts and ignoring them. And then, gradually she starts to engage with them, which is the way that she does this.
And then after we find out that Jeffrey didn't go to the volleyball game, Jenny comes home and talks about how she danced with Eddie Winters at the beach disco 3 times. And then she's saying who else was there. And it's Lila and Jessica and Eddie and Jeffrey Froooonch and Roger and Olivia. Jeffrey was there? She demanded. Jenny nodded. It was so romantic. He and Lila kept dancing together to all these slow songs. You could just tell from the way they were holding each other that they were falling madly in love. Elizabeth's face burned. So that was why he hadn't met with Enid. He hadn't met Enid at the volleyball game. She couldn't believe he'd do a rotten thing like that to poor Enid. The more she thought about it, the angrier she felt. And then later in that same section, she wasn't sure why she was so upset about the whole thing. But she assured herself any good friend would feel the way she was feeling. Sure. Yeah. Nothing to see here. Nothing to say.
Chapter 6. This is so satisfying. So satisfying.
Oh my God. This is so... Listeners, if you're not reading along, you might just want to read this chapter.
So I said Jeffrey is direct and calls her on her bullshit. This is a big part where that happens. So basically, she's passive aggressive towards Jeffrey when she sees him. She's like, I've got some reading to do. And he's like, you sound mad. Have I done something to upset you? She wasn't used to guys who were as forthright as him. And she won't admit what she's upset about. And then she's like, well, I was kind of surprised when my cousin said that she saw you at the beach disco. I thought you were planning on going to the volleyball game to meet Enid. And he goes, and I thought you were going to be with your cousin. She's like, he goes, you said you couldn't go to the game because you had promised to do something with Jenny. So it seems to me that if anyone around here has a right to be mad. Elizabeth stared at him, completely confused. Well, I mean, I guess you Wakefield twins, he said with mock severity. Don't you think things are confusing enough for a guy as it is? She gulped, something in the tone of his voice. It wasn't possible that he'd gone to the disco just because she'd said she was going to be with Jenny, was it? So, this is what she needs. She needs someone like this. He can help her grow into someone who handles her feelings in a healthier way.
And even just the way that he is being direct kind of forces Elizabeth to confront some of this.
Yes.
Elizabeth felt distinctly uncomfortable. Unless she was reading the situation wrong, it sounded as though Jeffrey were trying to hint that he'd made his mind up because of her. She couldn't believe a mix-up like this could have happened. Jeffrey wasn't supposed to be interested in her. He was supposed to be interested in Enid. And what kind of best friend, she wondered, would promise to fix her friend up with a fabulous new guy and then steal him for herself? And it feels like all of a sudden this is helping her to realize what's actually going on.
If this was Todd, they wouldn't have said another word to each other until the last page.
Okay, if this was Todd, the bell would have rung and Todd would have been like, oh, I've got to run to my macrame class. So this is the point in the book where I started reminiscing about the times when some of my favorite nights out at bars gay bars, sorry, listeners, gay bars, is when I am trying to set up and obviously this is from 10 years ago, listeners, because I haven't been out in 100 years. When I am trying to set up my friend with a hot guy at the bar, and the hot guy at the bar is interested in me and not my friend, is like my favorite kind of class of memories. And there are several of them that I just really, really love. Do you want to have
you and Alice, the sort of Venn diagram of you and Alice Wakefield?
It's a circle, baby. That is a circle. I wondered, did you want to hear any of my favorites, or
You're like
fine?
Pearl?
So do you want to hear any of my favorite of those stories?
Oh, sorry, yes. Please, we're only 2 hours in.
I was in London for a conference, and I met up with a friend of a friend who lived in London with his husband and a bunch of their gay friends. And we went to dinner, and then we went out to gay bars. And it just so happened there were like probably 8 of us or 7 of us. And it turned out that everyone was in a relationship except
Well, was it 8 or was it 7? I mean, we have to know. Please don't just blow by that, Robert.
I love you. I think it was actually probably 6. Only one of us was single. So we go to GAY, which is like just a gay club bar in London. And we're dancing. And there is this like incredibly hot, like 6'5", blonde curly hair rugby player. And the single friend is like, oh, he's so hot. Like, I really want to talk to him. And so I'm like, oh, I'm the perfect wingman. Let me do this. And so I go up to the hot rugby guy and I'm like, hey, how are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm out with my friends. Like, do you want to come like talk and dance with us? He's like, sure. And so he comes and talks and dances with us. And I'm like introducing him to this guy, doing basically like the Liz shuffle, where I'm like, oh, blah, 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 talk to each other, dance with each other. And the guy like talks to him for a little bit and then talks to me more. And I'm like, oh, this is fine. We're talking, we're dancing, we're talking, we're dancing. And then we're like, oh, we're going to go to this other club. Do you want to come so you can still be with Roger or whoever? And then he comes and he follows. And then I'm still staying out. And then Roger finally is like, I'm going to go home. And I like turn to the blonde Adonis and I'm like, oh, I bet like you want to go home too now that Roger's leaving. Like, do you want to leave with Roger?
You're so full of shit.
Wait, what's full of shit?
Because you were so saying to the blonde, like, oh, I'm sure you don't want to be here with me, Robert. I'm such a troll. Of course you'd be interested in my less hot friend. Of course you'd be interested in my less hot friend than me. I'm so charming and funny and handsome. And I'm just here for someone else, so not even thinking of myself.
And it does turn out, listeners, he did say, no, I was actually just here for you. I'll stay and hang out with you.
And now I need you to pick a character from Sweet Valley for you, the tall hot, and the friend you were setting up in terms of hotness. I need you to tell me who's who.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm an Elizabeth. Like, classically hot, basic.
You're more of Jessica.
Yeah, I mean,
you have charisma.
I'm a Jessica. Tall
and
blonde
rhythm.
hot.
You have charisma and rhythm.
Is tall blonde hot Ken Matthews potentially? And then I bet friend was like Enid level. Like,
yeah, so you knew what you were doing.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes, of course I knew exactly what I was doing.
Yeah, okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Enid decides, okay, I'm going to buy him at the auction. This is great.
And they have to scheme to make sure that Jess and Lila don't come to the auction because they don't know that Jeffrey's going to be there. So Enid comes up with this scheme to keep Jess and Lila away and says, hey, if y'all are coming to the auction, that's perfect because you can help me like box up canned goods before and after. And so then Lila and Jess are like unable for some reason to go to the auction because they know they'll have to box stuff up otherwise.
Yeah, that was smart. That was smart. And then we're at the auction, and of course Winston is the auctioneer, as it were.
Winston, notable trans ally. Winston starts announcing ladies, gentlemen, and assorted others. We got, how much do you love that one of the things they're auctioning off is a candid snapshot of Bruce Patman in a bathing suit?
Wait, what? I missed that.
Oh, yeah. You know how it's more like a Band-Aid than a bathing suit.
Yeah, of course.
The other thing I find kind of noteworthy about that is...
Oh my God, that's so funny. Jaworski's pen? Dorsey's red pen. Then Enid wins the bid for Jeffrey. Elizabeth knows she ought to be happy for her friend. So why does she feel as though she's about to burst into tears? So Enid has won like a dinner date with him.
Meanwhile, Eddie, Jessica, and Jenny go to see Wuthering Heights. Jessica's obviously not into it, but Eddie and Jenny are really into it and clearly really into each other.
And Jenny has taken off her glasses and gotten some hair gel and looks sort of presentable, Jessica notices, and isn't that strange? They're debating Mozart versus Schubert.
So they see that Enid and Jeffrey are on a date, question mark?
Yeah, they're like at the Dairy Burger. So they see them eating. She's like, what's she doing with him? He's so good looking. She thinks to herself, was he deranged enough to consider Enid Rollins entertaining? It's funny.
We also have already been primed to think the Dairy Burger is not somewhere you take a date because Jessica has taken Jenny and Eddie to the Dairy Burger so that Jenny and Eddie can't talk because the Dairy Burger is like loud and full of commotion. So we're primed to be like, wait, it seems like if Jeffrey Froooonch has taken Enid to the Dairy Burger, he must not be that into her.
And he ends up telling Jess that she actually won me at this auction. And Jess is like, wow, my flesh and blood was so deceitful. And she thinks to herself, she's going to get even. And then we basically see that, like, Enid's perspective that, like, Jeffrey's been perfectly nice, but it's very clear that it's just friends vibes. And he's kind of made that clear to her. And, like, he's like, so what do you, like, he suggested Dairy Burger for dinner, which already isn't that romantic. And then for what do you want to do after? He's like, let's go to the beach, just go and see if people are around. She's like, okay, he's definitely not interested. And, like, she sort of feels relieved because, like, okay, now we're done with this. Great. But they end up actually having a nice time at the beach disco. They have, like, they dance together, but it ends up being totally friendly.
Yeah.
Jessica's plan to get revenge on Liz and Enid had taken shape the day before. The thing that bothered Jessica most was that Elizabeth had dared to scheme behind her back. This was so unlike her twin, and Jessica didn't want it to become a regular practice. No, this uncharacteristic plotting would have to be stopped immediately. Right? Everyone has to get back to their lane. She can't stomach the idea of Enid and Jeffrey as a couple. And again, I think what they're fighting over is, like, what kind of... Doesn't Enid... They're fighting over the ideology of, like, what Enid represents for them, you know?
It's so funny because it's like, could you imagine reading these books and thinking, oh, they're just like fighting over the boy? And it's like, no, sweetie, they're fighting over the ideology of what Enid represents. Come on. Come on. Please.
All right, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're ready for them. And the way they're going to be ready for them is what Lila takes them to, is going to take them to some big soccer game in LA. That's their plan, something like this.
Yeah.
Whatever, they're plotting. Then they're at the big party.
That beach party that we've heard so much about that's going to raise so much food for the food bank.
I mean, the PTA I can see has transformed the beach. I'm not seeing any details about ticket prices or anything like this, but
I mean, there's cookout, dancing, games, prizes. I mean, we've got to be charging an admission.
Enid's like, I don't think he's interested in me. And Liz is like, you can't give up. You can't be so negative. Like, we have to keep pushing. Enid keeps trying to explain to her, but Liz keeps insisting. And the more Enid protests, the more determined Elizabeth becomes.
For some reason, Elizabeth insisted on getting the two together. Jeffrey is sexy. He's like hanging out with Lila, and Liz approaches, and he goes, let me just say hello to Liz for a second. And he strolls over to the edge of the dance floor towards a spot where Elizabeth was standing on the sandy beach. How are you doing, stranger? He asked, giving her a special smile. How many cans of soup would you give for a special smile from Jeffrey?
Elizabeth's and Robert's and Pardo's hearts beat faster.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth slut shames Lila's outfit.
Does she?
Yeah, she's like, gold spangled. It was way too low cut. It looks like she's showing so much skin as a bathing suit.
Which is so weird.
And then
they're on the beach. Why would it be weird to expose as much skin as in a bathing suit?
Oh no. Then Liz like pulls Jeffrey away and they're doing like oracle business. And Jeffrey's trying to be friendly and warm and connect and say, let's go for a swim. And she's blushing and says, let's do this oracle stuff. And she keeps avoiding. He's trying to connect with her. And she keeps And then she's like, there's Enid. Let's go talk to Enid. He's like, what? Why? And she's like, oh, let me leave you alone with Enid. And then she and Jess like confront each other.
Elizabeth Wakefield, Jessica hollered, you wait right there. I've got to talk to you. An inquisitive smile on her face, Elizabeth turned to see her sister. They were safely out of earshot of Enid and Jeffrey, but Jessica's voice was gaining volume with every second. How dare you? Lila told me what you did just now. You dragged Jeffrey away from her just so you could get him together with Enid. I think it's disgusting. Elizabeth's cheeks burned. Well, it's no worse than you trying to fix him up with Lila, is it? Of all the sneaky, low-down tricks to play on your own sister, you two kept Lila and me from coming to the auction so Enid could win Jeffrey as her date. So what? You and Lila kept Enid and me from coming to the pool party you had last week, didn't you? Enid's all wrong for Jeffrey. Can't you see that, Liz? He doesn't care about her at all. Well, he doesn't seem to care very much about Lila either. Just leave me alone, okay? Jessica glared at her. Suit yourself. And at this point, Liz is like very activated about something that doesn't really make sense to be this. And Jessica is really activated about something that doesn't really make sense to be about this.
Yeah, Liz keeps freaking out. Enid's like, Liz, you need to let this go. Like, stop. You're driving me crazy. And Liz is like, no, but one more chance. Like, let me make one more desperate plea. And she basically gets into a mania. And she runs after Jeffrey. And he is moody and his expression is sullen. And she keeps trying to talk. She, like, one more time, like, tries to be pushing Enid on him. And she's like, well, why are you being with Enid right now? And he finally goes, listen, Liz, what's this business about Enid anyway? Are you trying to play some kind of game with me? Every time I see you, you're going on and on about fucking Enid. Enid's so good at photography. Enid should give you a tour of Sweet Valley. Like, don't you think she's nice? Elizabeth said. Yeah, sure, she's nice. What does that have to do with anything? You just haven't gotten to know her yet if you give her a chance. And this line is where I said, yes! He goes, look, I'm a big boy, Liz. I'm almost 17. I don't need any help choosing who I go out with. And I say, thank you. And I clapped and clapped and clapped. And she's like, but Enid really cares about you. And he's like, stop it. Covering his ears with his hands. His eyes were fiery with anger. Listen to me, he said, putting his hands on her shoulders and giving her a little shake that was almost rough.
But still very sexy.
Enid Rollins is nice, but that's it. And I can take care of my romantic life on my own. And then they separate and she's crying. And then Jess comes and sits down next to her and says, Liz, you need to fucking admit that you obviously like Jeffrey too. And Liz is like, what? Could it be? Who, me and Jeffrey? And Jess like stares at her and she's like, okay, yeah, I guess I do. So then she goes and runs after him. Okay, before we get to final Liz with Jeffrey, we get a wrap-up of Jenny and Eddie, where we learn Eddie and Jenny are together. It just has a pretty good attitude about it. It gets over it pretty quick and is actually, like, good-natured about it, I think. Then we get... Liz finally tells Enid the truth, and she's like, I got mixed up about my own feelings, and I guess I didn't realize it, but I was actually having feelings to him, but then I actually felt guilty, and I guess I didn't realize, and I was sort of in denial. And Enid's like, don't worry about it. Go get your man.
Oh, Elizabeth sits down with Enid and says, tell me what's on your mind. Well, in the first place, my intentions were good right from the start.
Oh, I know.
It's just such a Liz way to do this. It's like, just so you know, I am still good. I am not bad. I am not doing anything evil or nefarious. I am not wrong. What I did was fine. Oopsie doodles. It turns out I want to fuck Jeffrey.
I do think it's okay, like, and I could understand, and I don't think it's bad that she would tell her friend, like, okay, I hope, because she's about to tell her something that she thinks might be upsetting or might be paint her in a bad light, and she does want to say to her, like, if this is hurtful for you, I also want you to know that it wasn't like I went from the start trying to do this, you know?
Yeah.
And then Enid's like, why would you keep trying to get us together if you cared about him? And Liz goes, good question. And then here's where the lie is.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't realize how I felt until this afternoon. Now, I got to tell you something. She says she didn't realize how she felt till Jess confronted her and told her. And she didn't explicitly acknowledge it until then. But It reminded me of on Love Island All-Stars with Georgia S., who I was telling you about, and Toby, where she basically was like with other guys and said she only liked these other guys. She doesn't have any feelings for Toby. When Toby picked her the recoupling, and he made this whole speech about how much he like loved her, and she's like, oh, like suddenly I realized I do have feelings for him. And she had to keep like pushing this narrative that like literally neither of them realized it until that second, and that's why she couldn't have told the guy she was with beforehand, and that's why he couldn't have told the girl he was with beforehand, because he like literally didn't realize it till the words were coming out of her mouth. It's like such bullshit, but whatever.
That door was completely shut. The door with Toby, yeah? I honestly, truly believe I had no feelings, okay? When he stood up at the fire pit and said all them things, that made me feel a certain way. I did not expect to feel that certain way.
Georgia, you 4 broken biscuits.
All right. Finally, Elizabeth cuts in. Jeffrey and Lila are dancing, and Jeffrey says, well, the reporter and the photographer have to dance, so you have to let her cut in.
What? So silly. Bad
And then-
Jeffrey. Bad Jeffrey.
A slow song was starting up, and Jeffrey took her hand. You have to relax, he said softly, or we're never going to be able to dance. And what's a thing that if you don't relax, you aren't able to do? Penetrate.
What?
The next minute, come on. Have you ever heard someone say, you have to relax or we're not going to be able to dance, to slow dance? Like, it doesn't even make sense. The next minute she was in his arms and the whole world made sense again. Elizabeth put her head against his shoulder. He smelled so clean and his arms so warm around her. Her heart is pounding. And then he's like, you didn't come find me so you could keep talking about Enid. And she's like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be so pushy. Enid's my best friend. And then he goes, silly girl. Resting his chin on her head as they danced. Don't you realize I'm already taken? Taken? Elizabeth repeated stupidly.
That sounds-
You mean, I mean, I like Enid, but I couldn't be interested in her because I'm in love with someone else.
In love,
Oh.
you say, Jeffrey. In love?
Elizabeth feels so sad. Well, I guess he's in love with someone who isn't me.
He already has a girlfriend.
And he's like, only she just doesn't seem to realize it. Putting his hand under her chin and tilting it upward so she could look deep into their eyes. Suddenly everything made sense. She only had to look at him to know what he meant. She didn't know what to say, but it didn't matter. For the next instant, Jeffrey was leaning forward and Elizabeth's eyes closed as his lips came closer. She had never felt a touch so gentle before in her whole life, and she prayed that the kiss would last and last.
In Todd's defense, it makes sense that Liz would not have felt such a gentle touch because Todd wouldn't know that he needed to be so gentle because he would, of course, be picturing that Liz was a boy. So,
Okay.
just saying, justice for Todd.
They're being tender. He tightens his arms. She says she's never letting him go. The droids play a song that it feels like it's about them. And they're very happy.
You know who isn't happy? Lila Fowler.
Lila.
She's pissed off.
All right. Take us to the cliff.
So Jess and Lila are fighting. And then Lila goes, hey, Jess, Mr. Collins is waving at you. He looks like he's trying to get your attention. Jessica frowned. What could Mr. Collins want with her? A minute later, she had strolled across the lot to meet him. He was with Teddy, his adorable son, who was covered from head to foot with sand. Oh, Jessica, Mr. Collins said, looking at her in confusion. I'm so sorry. I could have sworn you were Elizabeth. I guess I just saw the fiat in the blonde hair and assumed. Jessica felt her face go red. That's okay. As she walked away, she could hear Teddy saying, but which one is she, Daddy?
So weird. So weird.
I mean, it's weird of the book. It's weird of me and my performance style. That wasn't great. I can take feedback on that.
No, I meant whatever.
Yeah. Jessica couldn't believe it. This was the final straw. She had always thought it was a lot of fun being a twin, but not if people couldn't even tell them apart anymore. Not if people were just starting to assume that she was Elizabeth all the time. Jessica couldn't stand the thought of losing her own identity. There was no way she was going to let people think she was Elizabeth. This was getting absurd. She was just going to have to think of some way to make sure no one made that mistake again, even if it meant doing something unbelievably drastic. Jessica takes desperate action in Sweet Valley High number 32, The New Jessica. I have a guess.
Mm-hmm.
She goes brunette. It feels I'm putting you in an unfair position. She either gets a dramatic like pixie haircut, which I hope she doesn't, or the drastic thing she does is because Collins just saw blonde hair in the Fiat and assumed she goes brunette. It's got to be hair related. That I'm certain of.
All I'm going to say is one thing, and that is, I implore you to really not look at the cover, because I know on your Kindle the cover comes and you have to automatically skip it, and sometimes you're able to and sometimes you're not able to resist the temptation.
I need to resist?
Yeah.
Because something is afoot.
Something's drastic.
Something is a hair. I mean, what, like she's gonna get a face tattoo? Wouldn't that be funny? So all in all, a pretty quick, easy read. I'm not sure if this podcast was a quick, easy listen, but if you have someone in your life that you're thinking, I want to set them up, not on a romantic date with someone sexy like Jeffrey Froooonch, but on like more of a friend date with two sexy, attractive, insightful scholars who are obsessive and very strange about the books of Francine Pascal and Kate Willem. What I'd love for you to do is I'd love for you to just text this. Just press share in whatever app you're in. And just, I mean, it doesn't have to be someone you like. You could just randomly spam people in your phone with our app or with our episode. Send everybody. Tell them to listen. Send it to a friend. Set them up on a crash course of romance and adventure with Dr. Rebecca Pardo and Robert Marks.
I hadn't considered spam, and that's a great idea. Doxing SWAT, where you call the SWAT team to their home,
Sure.
Anything to just kind of get someone's attention and spread the word and broadcast the message would be great.
Yeah, maybe not the I just meant like text a bunch of people. I didn't mean anything else.
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.